Hello and welcome to the Psychic Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Jack Middlemore. Jack's a rugby player who originally shared his mental health journey on the Blindside documentary series about a group of people who found solidarity and camaraderie through playing rugby. Jack, how are you doing? Good evening.
Yeah, good evening to you too, Matt. How's it going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, doing okay, thank you. Getting on with things.
Good. For those who aren't looking at a video, Jack has been playing rugby and his face shows it.
Yeah. First 5 minutes after kick-off, feels a kick, and then got tackled. Their team tried to clear out the ruck, and someone decided that they're studs, but lovely on my forehead.
Oh.
So, yeah, got a nice little scratch and a graze.
A good welcome start to the back into the game, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Jack. So today we hope to have an open, honest conversation about your mental health journey to get some insight into the tools and techniques that have helped you and are available and accessible to other people. And by discussing your journey, we hope to share and normalize the conversations about mental health, as often people are not alone in the experiences. And frankly, we're never alone in these experiences.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So Jack, I would love to hear a bit about your mental health journey.
Yeah, sure. So I think mental health growing up was something that always was there for me. I was bullied a fair bit at school, so a lot of anxiety around that, a lot of sort of not wanting to go to school, things along those lines. But for me, it sort of really ramped up when I went to uni. Uni was never something that I really planned on doing. I applied because my sixth form encouraged it, and I got into my first choice, which I was over the moon about. But
that's pretty natural, right? Like no one really knows, and you're kind of told to apply, and you apply and don't really think about it, you just turn up.
Yeah, 17, 18 years old. I still have no idea what to do with my life. I'm 24 now. But
mate, I'm 36. I got no idea.
Yeah, life just comes at you. But sort of 17, 18, I was like, oh, I guess I have to do something next, don't I? So getting into uni, I was like, fair enough, off we go. And I found uni, the excitement around it's fantastic, and there are some really, really amazing parts of the culture. The social life, I think, is incredible, but in smaller doses, I think, than is currently encouraged. I found sort of the uni drinking culture very destructive, and I bought into it heavily as well.
Yeah. Is that the general like drinking culture, or is that more around the sport kind of side of things, or do you think it's just people have too much time and just basically have a student loan and just spend it on booze?
I think it's a mixture of all three. Quite honestly,
it's a great way to spend that student loan, isn't it?
It massively is, yeah, definitely. And it goes quick when you're going out 3 times a week and all that.
Very true.
But yeah, I loved being at uni at times, but I found it also weirdly quite isolating. Sort of going from being at home in an environment that I was comfortable with to being at uni, living in halls of 200-300 strangers. And whilst you're in a flat with people, you don't know any of them. You're not mates with them for the first couple of weeks. And even then, I still found it quite isolating at times, even after being in halls for sort of 6 months plus. You know, you go into your room and you're by yourself. And I don't know, for me, I found it very isolating. And that sort of,
I just say it's a really weird experience, right? Because
so
like you're almost, I mean, frankly, a lot of people are peacocking, right? Like there's a lot of energy that goes into trying to make friends and things like that.
Massively.
When that door closes at night, you're like, I'm still on my own, and I'm exhausted. Like, and actually, I'm not sure I like anyone that I've met.
Yeah. At times, it's quite difficult. You get a real hot pot of personalities, I guess, don't you? A real sort of mixture and blends, and some people just don't get along with, and sometimes it just isn't the right environment for some people. I think that was the case for me, but I just wasn't ready or willing to admit that.
Did you find, like, just going back to when you were at school, you said like about being bullied and stuff, like, was that something that did you recognize that you had some anxiety around that, or like when you were in, let's say, new social situations, did you feel worried? And you know, how did that manifest itself?
Yeah, I'd get sort of that, I've always referred to it as that sort of anxious knot in my stomach, that knotted sensation that almost hurts. Sometimes shaky hands, I get a bit of a stutter sometimes. And I think sort of as a result of that, I've gotten really good at faking being confident. So I come across as a very confident person, and a lot of the times I'm there like, get me out of here, I can't stand this. It's just, this is a lot to deal with right now. But you get very good at sort of hiding that and sort of projecting a different a different front, I find.
But I think that's a really good way to put it, isn't it? Is like if that mask comes on, like in some
Yes.
respects you're acting like, and actually in some like you can almost sometimes kid yourself, especially if drinks involved. Then when that mask comes on,
Yeah.
you know, Jack is that mask, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like it's very
Yeah.
difficult sometimes to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, massively so. Massively so. I find myself sort of trying to be the life of the party once drinks got involved, and a lot of the times that was me forcing something to come across as confident just so I didn't feel anxious.
Yeah.
And it sort of resulted in me doing things or getting in situations I didn't want to be in, or just the very act of it wasn't right for me. And it sort of, that in itself is quite emotionally draining.
Yeah.
That can sort of take its toll when you're just in a situation where you know you shouldn't be in it, or it just isn't meeting your needs in that moment. And for the longest time, I couldn't recognize that. I knew I wasn't happy, but I wasn't putting the two and two together because I thought this is normal. This is the uni culture. And don't get me wrong, I had some fantastic nights, some nights that I still talk about to this day, and some experiences I still talk about to this day. But being hungover 3-4 days a week,
it's not great for your mental health, is it? Let's be honest.
No, it takes a huge toll. And I think the issue for me is, so when I came back from my first year of uni, I came home, and the first day back, I found out my parents were getting divorced. And at sort of 18, 19 years old, I had no idea sort of anything was wrong with the marriage, more importantly. And looking back at it, it probably was the best thing to happen, I think, for my mum and my dad, both as individuals.
But especially in hindsight, you see them now and you kind of think, that's what your good side looks like.
Yes, you see that they're both happier, and 25 years together. And for me, it was much of a blindside moment. I had no idea it was coming, and I had no idea how to process it. I was finding things out about my parents' relationship that I didn't know, and did I want to know? More importantly, how do you process hearing things about your parents and their actions when they're your idols?
Well, that's it, and it's for the first time in your life, the parents on your, they fall off their pedestals because you've put them on one, and they're back to your level, and you realize, like, shit, like mum and dad, you're just like me.
Yeah, exactly.
If not worse.
If not, exactly. And so you then sort of had a very awkward summer of, my parents were in the process of getting divorced, but my dad was still in the house. So my dad's in the guest room, mum's in what was their room for the past 10 years in that house. And it's just a very strange experience. And it's really rough being at the dinner table. And we were still eating as a family, but like no one was talking. And that's a really unpleasant experience. And I struggled with that. I didn't know how to process that, quite honestly. And it took a long time
did you want to say, look, let's talk about it, like surely this is a good thing to talk about, or actually was it just like we've got no idea what to say?
There's part of me that wanted to say something, and there's part of me that just quite honestly wanted the whole thing to go away.
Fair enough. Right? It's a lot to take in, right?
Exactly. It's a lot to take in. And so sort of horrible, I wouldn't say it's a horrible summer, but it certainly wasn't one of my best summers to date. I went back to uni still sort of processing this information, and for me, the nights out sort of turned into an escape almost. I didn't have to think about that. Coupled that with sort of just, I wasn't happy at uni, full stop. I wasn't enjoying my degree. I wasn't doing well in my degree. I had no motivation to go to my lectures. I didn't want to go to my lectures, quite frankly. And then I think, my mental health sort of started spiraling a little bit more. And then just one night out, my friend sort of offered me a pill. And I was like, okay. He's like, this will make you feel better.
And frankly, it does.
It did. Yeah. I felt on top of the world for 4 or 5 hours. And the next day I felt horrendous. But I fell into the sort of the trap of then chasing that, of them being down that rabbit hole for a while.
Up, down, up, down, up, down.
Up, down. Yeah. Doing that sort of 2 or 3 times a week takes its toll very quickly. It really, really took its toll on me.
And did you, like, at the time, like, because you obviously now you're really like eloquent about talking about your own mental health and stuff, like at the time, like, did you have any awareness other than, I feel really bad sometimes, but when I drink or take this, I feel quite good?
I don't think I was willing to go past that surface level. I wasn't willing to sort of approach it at a deeper aspect. And that ramped up until the end of second year, and then back home from uni for that summer. Another uneventful summer. My parents had sort of finally moved into separate houses.
Yeah.
And that was, the back and forth was weird.
And that's always hard. That's hard for you because I assume, like you said, you've been in your original family house for a long time, and suddenly you've gone away to uni and you've come back and you're like,
everything's changed.
Everything's changed. There's two houses. I've got a bedroom in both, and it's like, I don't know what to do. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very weird, and it's just so difficult. And learning, I have a younger sister. There's 8 years between us, and learning more and more about that my mum and dad's relationship and the impact it's having on my sister as well as myself. And it's really hard to sort of balance that, because you want to be there for your family, but you don't know how you feel yourself about it. And that adds up, because then I felt like I wasn't being a good brother.
Which makes you feel even worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. But my sister didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't know how to talk about it with my sister. So it all sort of, it racks up. And then back to uni for what would have been it was my third year at uni, but I'd failed my second year. So I was redoing a year. And I was sort of spiraling more and more. I just didn't want to do stuff anymore. I'd stopped eating as much. And then I had just a really bad sports social. The night didn't go my way at all. The drink had ramped up, the drug abuse had ramped up, and I had just sort of a sports social evening where I'd been humiliated, quite honestly, quite publicly. And I'd had a really horrible night, and sort of like I had to leave the social, like I was sent home from the social early.
And that humiliation, does that go back to like when you were young with bullying and stuff like that?
Yeah,
I mean, surely that must have been a melting pot of just.
Oh God, yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of, it all in some ways tied back into itself. But had a horrible social. And I'd been, I think, sort of over that year of just drink and drugs and doing things that didn't make me happy, but I thought would make me happy, or I thought would be the right thing to do, partying, socially at sports at uni, that sort of thing. It just wasn't right for me, but I stayed in that environment, and that also, after a while, started to get quite toxic and quite, it didn't align with what I wanted or my morals at the time, but I wasn't willing to admit that. So I think that's also quite a big internal battle. And I was at the point where I fully hated myself. I didn't want to be here anymore, quite honestly. And so that night.
And was that because of that kind of conflict between like that kind of that mask that you said come over that had got so extreme, and then you could almost in some respect look back at yourself and say, well, that's the person I want to be, this is the person who I'm being, and these do not fit together, and they're so far away from each other, I don't even know how to talk to each other, so to speak, you know?
Yeah, partially. I think it's just a mixture of sort of, I was at uni, I hated being at uni. I didn't enjoy my degree. I enjoyed parts of my degree, but as a whole, I was never attending lectures. So I don't think I ever fully tried with the degree. I hated myself for how I wasn't trying. I hated myself because I was failing the degree. I hated myself because I was constantly, the beer fear was in full effect 3 mornings every week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Did you notice that kind of, inner dialogue? When we talk about like, talking to yourself and hating yourself, like that's an inner voice, right? Did that inner voice, was that inner voice always there, or did it start to ramp up at a certain stage? Did you realize that, or did you just get overwhelmed with these sorts of, basically, like you said, I hate myself, you're shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. It was always there. I think some, like, I feel like whenever you're anxious, there's always that inner dialogue there, isn't there? Sort of, you're not good enough, or you're not going to fit in, or they're not going to like you. And that ramped up, I think, especially with sort of the drink and drug abuse, that is going to get worse. That's going to become more and more. And the more I started to hate myself, the more that dialogue increased, the more vocal it was, I guess.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. It just starts to dominate, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. I would do something and go, oh, you're not good enough. You don't deserve to be happy. You're not worthy of being happy. This happened to you because you're not good enough,
the thing is, if that goes on every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, it becomes a habit, right?
Yeah, it's fully a habit, and it's a very hard pattern to break.
Yeah, I agree.
Because how do you shift your mindset from being, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you deserve all these bad things that are happening to you, albeit bad things were happening as a result of my actions, but the actions, I was behaving how I was because I didn't think I was good enough. So it's sort of like a vicious loop, isn't it? You keep going round and round and round. I'm not good enough, so I'm going to go out tonight, take some drugs and try and talk to some girls. But actually, I hate the come down. I hate how I feel the next day. I hate having casual sex. I don't like how it makes me feel. So it all sort of ties into a loop, because you think that makes you feel better, but you hate yourself the next day for it, and you keep trying to go in that pattern.
And I think I also like if we draw ourselves away from that, we kind of like, look, you look at yourself back then, right? It sounds like as well you had no tools to cope with whatever you got to deal with, right? Like, and this is the thing which always comes up on our kind of on our podcast conversations. It's like, what the hell's school for? Like, if there's one thing that seems to, it turns out people, it doesn't seem to churn out people who are self-aware or who've got the kind of tools to cope. And there's the argument that you've got to go through life's pretty average challenges to get through that and to get that toolkit. But I'm pretty certain we could be given, or at least taught, some level of coping, so that if you are in a bit of a shit situation, you can start to, at least pull yourself back a bit and go, actually, this might not be quite good for me, and actually have that more positive, constructive conversation in yourself.
I agree fully. In my eyes, mental health is physical health. I feel like there's no separation for me for me personally. I feel like the two are very much hand in hand. There's no separation there. And I didn't get the tools to deal with how I was feeling until I'd hit rock bottom and tried to go deeper, and then had to sort of finally go, I'm in a really terrible place. I need to seek professional help. And it wasn't until I started seeing a therapist that sort of, and I still see a therapist every week like clockwork. And that's one of my huge coping thing for me is that. But that night I went home and I'd been humiliated. I'd been hitting myself for a while. I was drunk. I was mad. I was upset. And I'd been thinking about taking my own life for a little while. Like, I'd had the thoughts, but I was never going to act on it, I don't think.
But the thing is, once you've got the thoughts, they don't go away, do they?
It was just a case of things would be easier if I'm not here. I'm causing issues. People's lives would be easier if I'm not here. Things would be easier for me if I haven't got to deal with this anymore.
These are powerful, I don't want to. These are powerful thoughts you can't control, right?
No, then they're there, and they're such a weight and a gravity behind those thoughts that no matter what you do, you can't shift them. They come into your head so casually when you're there, but the actual severity of that thought is very hard to sort of grasp the depth of, and the gravity of that thought. Because it's
scary as well, right?
And in some way your own mind is telling you subconsciously that you're so unhappy that you don't want to be here anymore. And that's such a mad idea in my eyes, that your own inner dialogue is that you're that unhappy that your own inner dialogue is giving you that thought process. And I tried to take my own life. I cut my wrists, and I overdosed on some very strong prescription medication, and as many cold and flu pills as we had in the house, which is about 3 or 4 packets worth. And I spent 3 days after that in hospital, getting flushed out, and I was so close to kidney failure that would have finished me off. But that would have been a horrible way to go.
And if you don't mind me asking, like, during that very difficult period, were there thoughts of regret that it hadn't worked, or actually was there kind of like a little blossoming of life in you going, hold on, right, second chance, here we go? If you don't mind me asking.
No, of course. It was, I think at first there was regret that it hadn't worked. I think after, when I was drunk, I'd fixated so much on that things would be easier if I wasn't here.
That was the solution.
That was the solution. I felt like I was the issue, and by removing the issue, you solve the problem. And that's not how to approach that situation. I know that now. But I was regretful that it didn't work for a few days afterwards. And then I sort of, quite honestly, after that happened, my best friend, my childhood best friend, came and spent 2 days or a day and a half in A&E with me as they flushed out all the toxins from my system and things like that. I went through all the various mental health checks, and then I was released, and I went home for back to my family home for 2 or 3 days. But being there was as much part of the problem as being at uni. I'm back in my family home where everything is not as it was, and that was part of the issue, is that I didn't, or I wasn't willing to deal with that change to my family. And so I just quite honestly brushed it under the rug. I just pretended it never happened. I went back to uni like 2 days later. I was back at my weekend job, my part-time job, like 4 or 5 days after it happened, just pretending it never happened. And that continued for 6 months or so. And for maybe a month and a half, I was like, okay, obviously there's an issue here. I'm going to stop going to the sports socials. I'm going to stop going out. I'm going to stop taking drugs.
Okay, so there was that kind of inkling that, hold on, like something's got to change. But then again, not only is something's got to change, it's like, I mean, there's two choices in those situations, right? And in one respect, you took one choice. You're like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
The second choice is I want to live, right?
Yeah.
Was there a conscious decision where you're like, you know what, this is the path I want to take?
Not at that point. No, I hadn't made that sort of choice. It was more from sort of close friends and family saying like, you need to stop this.
Right. So it was almost like they were providing you with those kind of like,
yeah, it wasn't a choice that
some insight and say, hold on, like, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, perhaps try that might make you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you receptive to that advice?
A bit. Not. I didn't want to quite honestly admit that it was an issue.
Yeah.
I didn't want to face it because that makes it, obviously what I'd done is very real, but then me looking in the mirror and going, why don't you want to be alive anymore? That makes it a lot more real. And I wasn't prepared to deal with that. I wasn't willing to deal with that, I think was the issue more than anything. Wasn't that I wasn't prepared to. It was that I wasn't willing to. So I brushed it under the rug, and I lived in a house with 7 other lads, and they are all good lads. They were good friends, but not as close anymore since we've left uni. That happens. And they each tried to be there for me in their own way.
That's amazing, that support, right?
Yeah. So we were all the same sports team. I lived with both social secretaries. So even when I was trying not to drink, I was still very involved socially in the team. And that was part of the issue for me, I think, at that point, is that that environment was wrong for me. And yeah, they all tried to be there, but nothing against the boys. They're all good lads, but I think just that environment wasn't the right place for me.
It wasn't healthy for you.
No, not for me. And that's nothing against those boys. Well, just that culture wasn't right for me.
Yeah, and frankly, like it's nothing to do with people and personalities, right? It's like like you said, in your state, which was you're in a dark state of mind. Actually, that in that respect, you would have needed some intensive support, right? Like, and frankly, a university environment, lads in a house, going out sport, like.
Yeah, sports lads in the house isn't going to be that environment.
That's not what's going to make you feel better or help you, right?
Exactly. And so I sort of, for maybe 4 to 6 weeks afterwards, was like, okay, this is fine. I haven't had any urges. I haven't done anything silly. I'm okay now. In my head, I was like, I'm okay now. This is okay. So I started going out again, and it was just once a week to start off with, and then back down the rabbit hole. It ramped up again. I was drinking. There was drug use, but not as common. It went from sort of once or twice a week to maybe once every other week, but there was still substances involved. And it just sort of it kept going. And I was redoing my second year of uni, and I was actually trying at that point, but I'd left it so late in the year after my suicide attempt that there was no way of salvaging my university year. So,
and did you find, like, when you said you started back into the drugs and stuff, was it almost like you said you weren't doing as hard as you were? Like, was there almost like I suppose there was that kind of there's kind of awareness. It's kind of I do a little I do a little bit, a little bit's okay. That's going to just kind of keep me above. I'm not going to do loads because that's what has maybe led me to previous. But and you can see quite. You can see how that can easily spiral, right?
Yeah, and it did
not fix the situation for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it'd be better. And I was still in a mindset of sort of, because I'd been enjoying that high so much, it made me feel quite honestly, I wasn't sort of numb or disassociative or just withdrawn. That I was still in the mindset that I needed that to have a good night and to enjoy myself. Which isn't the case. But that continued, and then maybe sort of 5-6 months after my suicide attempt, I just had another awful night where I felt that I'd been humiliated, and I hadn't been, but I just took things too far in terms of drink, and just sort of went off the rails again, and sort of threatened to kill myself quite publicly on my Snapchat and my social media. And I have no recollection of this at all. And my mum and childhood best friends they saw it, and they both came and got me, and they're like, "That's enough, you're not going back to uni." And then I think from there, really, the journey started properly in terms of dealing with it. And
what was your response to, like, you're not going back to uni? Were you like, "No, I'm going back"? Or was it
I was so mad at them. Yeah. I was in that car.
How dare you?
Yeah, like, effing and blind, like, I hate you, you're ruining my life. This is what I want to be doing. And in almost looking back at it now, it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I didn't want to be out all the time. I didn't want to be at uni, quite honestly. I wasn't enjoying I wasn't enjoying I never applied myself on that course. I never tried.
But it just wasn't for you, right? It sounds like it just wasn't the right place for you.
Yeah, it may have been, had I been in a different mindset, but I think with everything going on, and I have thought about going back a few times, but I just don't know if it's worth it, quite honestly, given the student debt and all the actual practical things.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But yeah, I was like, no, fuck you, I hate you, I need to go back for this. This is where I'm meant to be. And it was wrong, but I was so caught up in the idea of that this toxic environment would make me feel better about what I wasn't dealing with, that I felt I had to be there. And I felt like I needed to be in that environment that was so bad for me.
But also that environment's addictive, right? And not just
unbelievably. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the substances are addictive themselves, but
even alcohol itself. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a self-gratifying, like
yes,
you said, like, if you're going out every night and, casual sex, drink, drugs, I mean, it's a lifestyle of a rock and roller, right? Like,
yeah.
And in some respects, it's awesome in a very small kind of little
that short-term gratification was there, definitely the instant, but it wasn't rewarding in any other way apart from I'd feel good about myself for a few hours, and that was it.
And when you were in that car and you were effing and blinding, was that almost like you said, that mask, just fighting?
Yeah, I think I was mad at myself. I was mad at them. I was just mad, quite honestly. Just angry. I was angry. I was hurt. I was so unsure of sort of where I was and who I was and what I was doing. And I think it's one of the few times in my life where I've sort of actually had no idea who I was as a person. In sort of, I couldn't look at myself and go, what am I? Who am I? I just didn't know. I was so out of touch with myself.
But even like, the question is, do you think we should know? Can we know?
I don't think you can ever truly know, but I think you can certainly, there are ways that you can check in with yourself in terms of your needs and your wants and how you're feeling. And I was so out of touch with that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Probably more was the issue. And I wasn't respecting myself or my morals or doing things that made me feel like genuinely good. And that can really wear you down after a while, because without even realizing, you're going against yourself and you're sort of engaging in self-destructive behavior that might not actually feel like it, but it is in some sense.
It's a good way to put it. You're going against yourself. You're almost going like your kind of your thoughts and your values, especially what you want to do, can send you off on a current in one direction. But actually, if you turn around and fight against it, like, it is amazing, like how powerful that can be, and how, like you said, how destructive that can be.
Yeah, massively. It can be so destructive, and it sometimes it's a lot harder to stay true to yourself than it is to actually to sort of give in to those urges or the pressure or anything else around you.
And I suppose, like, when we've got such strong urges to be validated in front of people, and like you said, like, if you've got that front where let's say you were bullied and you're like, right, I'm going to be the life and soul of the party, like that trigger, that humiliation, you can see how that can basically pull the rug from under you instantly.
Humongously, yeah.
And then suddenly you're back, like you said, you hit the bottom, bad things happen, dark thoughts happen, and you're not, like you said, on that kind of, you're not swimming with your current of how you'd want your life to actually be. But these are powerful feelings that it's difficult to control.
Yeah, very much so.
Everyone wants to be loved, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think chasing validation for me was a huge thing, sort of through my sort of maybe 18 to 22, that sort of those 4 years. Chasing validation was a huge thing for me. It's something I didn't get a lot growing up from school, through being bullied. My relationship with my dad wasn't amazing growing up, and it only really came into its own when I was older. And yeah, so it's very much a case of seeking validation was a huge part of why I behaved how I behaved. I just wanted to be acknowledged, and people say I was good at something, and I found the life of the party. I could do that well, but it wasn't validation in the right ways, and I was trying to fill a hole with things that wouldn't fill that hole. And I was trying to meet a need,
and it's not like it's the, there's external validation, but also there's that internal validation, right, as well. Like you seek external validation when you don't trust yourself, right? When you don't trust that you're good at something. You need someone to say you're good at this, you're good at that. Whereas there's that really kind of satisfying sense, and it sounds like you've reached a place now where you know what is good for you, what it is, and if someone challenged you on that, you'd be like, no, fuck off. I don't agree with you.
I'm
this
very
is who
much.
I am.
Yeah, no, I'm very firm on sort of these days where if there's a situation I don't want to be in, I remove myself.
Just leave,
Yeah, I don't owe people
without
things.
telling anyone, just leave.
No, sometimes in the old backdoor shuffle.
I love a backdoor shuffle.
Oh, it's honestly my favorite things to do now on nights out. It's just a backdoor shuffle. It's incredible. But yeah, I'm very much a case of very much a believer now in saying that if I'm in a situation that I don't think is going to meet my needs, or isn't meeting my needs, or is making me not feel good about myself, it's a case of just saying no and removing yourself. You haven't got to be in that situation. You don't owe that situation or those people shit. You don't owe them a thing. But you do owe yourself an awful lot. And I think I can handle now, like you said about the external and internal validation, for the longest time as a sort of a young adult. I said it like I'm old, I'm only 24, but as a younger
in the last
adult,
5 years, it sounds like you've
changed a lot. I don't recognize that person.
Exactly. And you've lived like someone who's lived for 20, for 20 or 30, 40 years.
I've gotten my fair share of living in, 100%. But it's, I wasn't able to tell the difference. I thought external validation would internally validate me. So I was seeking that external validation because I thought that was going to make me feel good about who I am, and it wasn't. And I was straying further and further from what would validate me internally in doing so. So I think that also creates a really weird dynamic where you feel like the approval of your peers will make you feel good about yourself as a human being, but it doesn't. And so you seek that approval more and more, but subconsciously you don't want that, and you start to resent yourself for seeking that approval. It's a very vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle, and it's like completely illogical. But when you're in there, it makes complete sense. It's really strange.
Whereas, emotions are really logical.
But I suppose, does it help now if you, let's say you do have these thoughts, and I'm sure, I'm sure there are times where these thoughts still appear, right? Like, but you're able to cope with them, now, or much better now.
Yeah, like, much better. Yeah.
Are you able to take yourself, away and to say, hold on, Jack, that's what I'm thinking literally doesn't make sense. It's illogical. So I'm going to ignore that thought because that makes no sense. You can go away.
100%. I think sort of as a result of spending a lot of my life seeking validation, I'm still very harsh on myself. I'm a very harsh critic of myself.
Well, it's in your DNA now, right?
Yeah, it's very much been an ingrained. It's been an ingrained thought process for 10, 15 years of my life, and I'm only I'm still 24. So for a huge part of my mental life, it's been there. So it's still, the thoughts are still there. I still have insecurities. I still struggle with not being good enough or things like that. It just, how it presents itself has changed, I think, now, and how I deal with it has changed.
I think you're speaking like of a common human experience now, right?
Massively.
Like we're social creatures. Like we need validation. So, but obviously, like you said, like being aware of how that external validation can impact you internally is a really powerful insight, which if you don't have, you can, you can go down that rabbit hole. Like I'd be interested when, going back to that car, when you were kind of fighting, you said that your journey started like, I'd love to hear about how that journey did start, and the support that you got, the tools, the tips, the techniques that have helped you along your way.
Yeah. So I think for me, the journey really started where my best friend and my mother brought me home, And the next day they both came around. So my best friend's a lad called Jordan, and we've been friends since we were 12, so half of our lives. So he's been a huge part of my life growing up.
It sounds like we should have a big shout out to Jordan, right? For being a best mate, right?
Yeah, for going above and beyond, and I'll never be able to thank him properly.
He's your sidekick, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those friendships where even though we're now living in different places and doing different things, when we see each other, it's like nothing's ever changed.
Brotherhood, right?
Probably. Yeah, 100%. Like he got a key to my mum's new house before I got a key to the house. So
your mum prefers him?
I think so, yeah. He's the favourite son. But it's fine because his mum prefers me. So I think it balances out.
Win-win.
Yeah. But they both sort of sat me down, and I think what really hit me, it was seeing the impact my choices had on other people. It was realising that, watching my mum cry because she had to deal with the fact, or she was trying to deal with the fact that her firstborn, her son, didn't want to be alive anymore, and watching Jordan sort of seeing it in his eyes, realizing that his best friend, his brother, didn't want to be like. It was the impact of my actions that had sort of really, it made me realize that this wasn't an okay way to be living. It was seeing it on those that I love and realizing that I was having such a humongous impact. I wasn't being accountable or responsible for my decisions, which I was making them from a very dark place. I'm also a big believer in sort of there is a degree of accountability no matter what you do and where you're coming from. You have a responsibility to manage your emotions to some extent. And I wasn't doing that. And it was seeing that in my mum and my best friend's eyes. And I was like, my actions are really hurting other people and they're hurting me. And it was then that I realized like something had to change, because if it didn't change, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
And that's
the simple maths, right?
It was as simple as, if something doesn't change, I will try and kill myself again. I will still continue to hit myself, and it will happen inevitably. And I spent sort of 4 months building up to it, pretending that wasn't the case, but it was so the case.
And once you made that, I suppose, choice, how did that feel?
It's terrifying, quite honestly. You're having to realize that these demons, these issues are real, and sort of naming them makes them very real, and that in itself is quite frightening. You have to admit that the issues are real and that you're having these issues. That's quite a scary idea. But it was also empowering to a degree, because I was making the choice that I wanted to be alive. It wasn't a case of I wasn't living for the sake of living, or I didn't want to, well, I still at some points had dark thoughts, but I wasn't sort of in the mindset that I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be here, things would be easier if I wasn't here. It was a case of I'm here I'm living now. It's time to live. It's time to make choices that mean that I live my life how I want to be living my life. And that's quite empowering at the same time.
Oh, hugely. And did you find, because like to be able to kind of reframe those thoughts is amazing. Like, did you get support to be able to do that? Or was that something which actually came from really deep within you?
It was a mixture of the two. I think I made the decision. For me, it was seeing the impact on my mum and Jordan, seeing it in their eyes and going like, holy shit, what I've done is having such a humongous impact on those around me. And I also, I have quite a big family, and one of my cousins is an amazing lad called Aidan, and without telling me, and I still have this in my possession to this day, it's one of my most treasured possessions. He got a notebook and he got every single member of my family to write a message in it to me about how much they love me and how they want me here. And I still have it in my bedside table to this day. And it was things like that sort of, it makes you realize that you're here for more than yourself.
Yeah, but also like it gives you, it's power. That's proper validation. That's just love. That's love, right? Like that's what you're looking for. That's what you were looking for, right? That's the validation. It's like, hold on, people love me. I'm not a shit bloke. I'm actually
I'm not a waste of space. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this.
let's start exactly. And I still, it's one of my treasured, like one of my favorite memories, receiving that from my family. And
I can't imagine what you were like when you read that. Like, my God.
Tears instantly. I still cry when I read it now. I got teary then talking about it. It's such a powerful thing for me. It's a lot of the times it's that sort of beacon and a light when things get a bit darker.
But that's the thing, like you know, I know there are situations, and in life we are you know, there are situations where we are on our own, and there are some people who have tragically who really are alone.
Yes.
But at some stages in your life, you're not alone, and actually cultivating those relationships around you, even if it's a small group of people, like to know that they love you and you love them. For,
It's
you know,
huge.
yeah, and I don't understand it, but I mean, it makes me want to be here.
Yeah, it does. It's things like that. Those, you have shit moments, you have great moments, you have moments in between, but it's those moments that you treasure, and those experiences that are one of the major reasons why I wanted to stay alive, why I made the choice to be alive. It's life throws shit things at you. You know, I'm in a boot right now. I went to rugby for 3 months. That's shit,
Yeah.
but it's still so worth living. There's still beauty in all of it, and it's worth being here 100%.
And did you find that, like, because you said you still see a therapist, and like,
Yeah.
and that massively helps. Are there any other kind of like things that you do now on your kind of regular day to day, or on your every week, every month, that aren't necessarily, you know, intensive therapy, but things that keep you happy,
over.
you know,
Yeah.
happy Jack?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I sort of make the effort to do. I'm very big on doing things, just general things that make me happy. So if that's, I've just moved to Bristol with my girlfriend, and we live really close to the harbour.
Awesome.
And so something I love to go and do is take evening walks around the harbour with her. So it's so beautiful, and I love being in such a place with her.
Yeah.
Rugby is huge. I feel like between rugby and therapy, they saved my life, quite honestly. That camaraderie, the Dodgers, those boys, we have a group chat that's always going off. It's to the point where my phone has to be on do not disturb at night, or I get in trouble with the missus. So those boys are always there. The boys that I play with now at my new club, you know, it's that. The gym is a big one for me, but I'm also, I think it's the smaller things you can do, the self-care things, like taking that time to sort of check in with yourself emotionally, taking 5 minutes. I'm big on sort of, I was before I moved to Bristol. I haven't got a garden now, unfortunately, but when I used to live in Chippenham, I had a garden, and I was very big on sort of in the mornings, if I was having an anxious day, of sort of taking the time to check in with myself in the garden. So I'd take my socks off, and I would go and stand on the grass. And it's that
really
more,
feel it.
Yeah, that physical reaction could be very grounding. Sort of the wet grass, it brings you very much into the moment, and you can check in and take stock of how you're feeling, and you can check in with where is feeling good and where isn't feeling good, and what you think is bothering you, and that sort of, if you're aware of what's making you anxious, or that you are anxious, it's a lot easier to approach that in a way that you can deal with it than it is to just sort of go, oh shit, I feel anxious today. Let's not see what the cause of that is, and just sort of, you know, it's like the car light coming on and you ignoring it. It's that sort of thing. Yeah, 100%. So
and with that checking in with yourself, because I mean it's pretty profound, right? Is that something you were taught, or is that something that you've come to, you know, that's something that you've realized works for you and it's your own tool?
I think it's a middle ground for that one. It was something that my therapist would get me to do in sessions when when we were discussing sort of, you know, the meatier topics, I'll call it, sort of the more intense stuff. It's very easy to become overwhelmed. You get very anxious in the moment. Your body reacts very physically. And so he would do things like get me to ground myself, sort of take note of my feet being against the floor, my body in the chair, how I'm breathing, and those sort of, it brings you into that moment. It takes you out of that sort of heightened state of adrenaline, of fear, of upset, and it brings you more into the present moment. And it was something that he would get me to do, and I've realized through doing that it does just work for me, and it's something that I can use to sort of check in with myself quite well, and it functions well for me.
God, Jack. Honestly, Jack, thank you so much for sharing your story, right? Like,
thank you
for being so honest. And I think I can probably say on behalf of everyone, we are extremely happy that you are here sharing that story.
Thank you.
It sounds like, as well, like you said, you're 24 now.
24, yeah.
24. I mean, it sounds like you've lived multiple lives, but it also, like, I think what's encouraging, obviously you'd never wish that anyone would go through the experiences that you've been through at all, but by being self-aware at your frankly, at your young age, where you've got the whole of life in front of you, like, you know, I suppose you're now an empowered person, right? You're ready to take on work in whatever form it takes, family life, whatever form that takes, like deal with difficult conversations, and I suppose live in a much more kind of fulfilling way than you did before.
Yeah, 100%. It's a lot easier now to be true to myself and to live my life the way I want to live. But still, I'm better equipped to deal with things. So it's when there are bumps in the road, it isn't a case of the wheels off the wagon. It's a case of the wheels come loose. And it's, now I'm equipped to get that wheel back on, as opposed to it's on the roadside and the wagon's broken down. It's more a case of, I just need to do a few little things to fix it, or it's not as much of a battle now, I think. And it's such a, I always find it weird. I love saying the sentence because it's such a bizarre sentence, but I'm grateful that I went through what I've been through. I'm almost, it changed my life in such a positive way. So there are aspects of me that can completely appreciate and are grateful, not for how I felt and what I went through, but for the growth that it's caused me to, the challenges that I've had to face, and how that's helped me change as a person, and how it's helped me find these tools. Because beforehand, I was turning to sort of drink and drugs and partying, and those aren't healthy coping mechanisms. And now I have ones that are better for me.
And you find as well, like when you go through those really, really dark times, you kind of, it's a funny one, you kind of feel life's limits in a way. Like you feel your own boundaries and limits. And now you said you're sounding hugely grounded in terms of, and you understand what you love and what you don't, and therefore you only do the songs you love. And it becomes much more simple. But you can feel quite safe in the knowledge that you're so far away from those boundaries and those limits now, because you can choose where to walk now. You could choose to walk the boundary if you wanted, but you go, it might peer off the edge and go, nah, not today, I'm off.
Exactly. And I think
you're much more in control.
Yes, yeah. And I think a huge part of why people spiral in that way, and why I spiraled in that way, is I didn't feel like I was in control. And I was trying to take control in ways that I thought would work for me, but they didn't. I was making choices that I thought would empower me, and they were in very short terms, and the negative effects were much greater. But now I am in control a lot more about how I feel and what I do. And I think if you having the awareness of yourself to go, you know what, that sounds like it would really be shit for me mentally, I don't want to do that, you save yourself a lot of stress and trouble. Like you said, you can go up to the edge, you can peer over it, but you're a lot more empowered not to fall off that edge. You have that rope around your waist almost, you haven't quite got that. So it's it's strange, but it's very empowering.
And it is strange, like it's different. And I think you articulated it amazingly well, like, and some really useful images and analogies there as well, like, and it does feel like that, the rope, you feel tethered, you feel grounded, you feel centered. Like there's all these feelings which we try and articulate, which we often think we don't quite get the words out, but actually I think, speaking as you do, like you've provided during this episode like 10 images of, frankly, like, and I think visualizations and imagery is a very powerful part of healing as well. And by expressing what you've done, I really hope that people out there as well can really take solace in those images. And if they're going through a tough time, like, do imagine yourself being with a rope tied around you, and that actually there are a lot of people around you that love you, and you are connected to a lot of good things in the world. And that's something to live for.
100%. And that there are people around you that will pull that rope for you if you need them to. But it's life is worth living. I think I found more than anything these days.
I'd agree. Good on you, mate. Jack, thank you so much for a fascinating, insightful conversation, and really appreciate your honesty.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Cool. And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just search for Psychic Community or Psychic Stories and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show. And do check out our free Sidekick app for iPhone and iPad. It's a collection of interactive exercises, tools and tips to help you boost your mental well-being. The app enables you to build a personalized well-being toolkit to help you deal with life's ups and downs. Just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, and click the download now button in the header to take you to the App Store. Jack, thanks so much again.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.